Jacque Vaughn, former KU legendary All-American point guard, is back with Bill Self on the assistant coaching staff, and could he eventually be the next head coach once Bill Self retires?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, Jock Vaughn, the former well-accomplished KU basketball player turned NBA assistant and head coach, is now an assistant coach for Bill Self at the University of Kansas. We're going to talk about why it's a home run assistant coach hire, why he could potentially be the next head coach for KU basketball post Bill Self. Do I like it? Do I not? If that were the case, and we'll get into all that on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. You can do that over at FanDuel. Okay, so I guess for the younger audience, who is Jacque Vaughn? Obviously, for a lot of people, Jacque Vaughn was their favorite basketball player growing up. And, you know, you think about him in the 90s with Roy Williams being kind of you have an unbelievable team. 1996 to 1997 is arguably the greatest basketball team in Kansas basketball history, even compared to ones that won titles. Now, you can have a long-winded debate about which one actually is best. And, you know, because this one won the title, it should deserve to be that one, or yada, yada, yada. If we're just talking everything, they were number one or number two in the AP poll literally every single week of the season. They lost 2 games all year. One of them was in double overtime. The other one, they got upset in the Sweet 16 to an Arizona team that won the national title. It was one of the best teams in the country of all time at Kansas, and Jacque Vaughn was kind of the leader of that team, a team that had, you know, Scott Pollard, longtime NBA player, that had Rafe LaFrentz, a 2-time Big 12 Player of the Year, unbelievable player. Paul Pierce, obviously, you know, NBA Hall of Famer, in addition to what he did at Kansas, that had role players beyond that, right? We could go Gerard Hassan and on and on and on down the roster. But Jacque Vaughn was maybe the leader, the face of this group of players, and was a fan favorite among many, many fans for KU fans. And it could go back to, you know, the home game against Indiana, when he hits the game-winning shot. It can go to his, you know, inquisitive quotes that he gave, but he was the guy. He was the guy that the Kansas fans growing up, that if you were in Kansas and you played, you know, in your backyard and you were, oh, I'm Jacque Vaughn. Like that is kind of the guy that he was. He was this unbelievable player for KU. He was an All-American. I think he was a 2-time second-team consensus All-American, I believe. All Big 12 player, racked up assists, had team success, yada, 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 right? Plays for Roy Williams. So it's a cool full circle moment for a guy who was not like only just a great Jayhawk player, but was somebody who was known for being a cerebral basketball player. And I think if you asked anybody then, I wasn't, you know, at that time I was a youngling. So like, I don't know this, but I'm sure if you asked a lot of people who were covering the program or were fans of the program, like, you probably would not be surprised that Jacque Vaughn was going to be a coach after his playing days, knowing the type of player he was, knowing the type of person he was, right? And so him coming on board to join the staff at Kansas and Bill Self, beyond the notion of, you know, how good of a hire it is, which we'll get to here in a second. Spoiler, I think it's a very good hire. It's a cool moment, obviously, for a guy coming full circle, a guy who was a great under Roy Williams, who was a fan favorite, now turned assistant coach at Kansas. But it does come with an incredible amount of coaching resume. Like, this isn't just, oh, they hired one of their former players. Like, and that's the other thing. This isn't a former Bill Self player. This is a former Roy Williams player, right? There isn't a level of, oh, it's just, you know, a nostalgic hire, or it's just a nepotism hire, so to speak. Like, no, not at all. Not one bit, right? If you said that you could get an assistant coach who's been a former NBA head coach, that on its own carries a lot of weight, that this is an incredible hire for Kansas and Bill Self to have on the bench. It comes with a fantastic coaching resume, one that is overqualified for the assistant coach at a college basketball team. Like, Jacque Vaughn could easily right now be an assistant coach for another NBA team. He could easily, if he wanted to be a head coach at like, maybe a middle tier college basketball team, like if you were an Atlantic 10 team, or if you were like one of these, whatever, and you hired Jacque Vaughn as your head coach, nobody would bat an eye and be like, wow, that's a crazy hire. They'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. He was a former NBA head. You know what I mean? And he's now your assistant coach at a collegiate level. So what is the path for Jacque Vaughn? He obviously goes to KU. He has a double-digit career, whatever, in the NBA. And then he goes on. He finishes his career in the NBA with the San Antonio Spurs when they're kind of in their heyday. He retires and then becomes an assistant coach with the Spurs until 2012. So he's coaching with Greg Popovich. He's again like coaching in some of their prime years. And then he gets the head coaching job at the Orlando Magic in 2012. Obviously, things don't work out there, but he is a head coach at the NBA level. And then in 2015, he joins the Nets staff, which I don't know at the time if they would have been New Jersey or Brooklyn or whatever, but either way, he's with the Nets. He's an assistant coach from 2016 to 2022. Then he becomes the interim head coach and then eventually the full-time head coach between 2022 to 2024. Eventually gets let go there. That is a lot of the high-level basketball experience. Like, think about it this way. And I think about this too in like NFL terms. A lot of times you can say, like Urban Meyer, for instance, Urban Meyer was a disaster as an NFL head coach with the Jaguars. He was like one of the 2 or 3 best coaches in college football. And so to a certain extent, when there's a profession like the NBA or the NFL or whatever, where there's only 30 jobs, there's only 30 head coaching jobs, you could be the worst head coach in the NBA and still be one of the 50, one of the 30, one of the 100 best coaches in the world. That doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes guys aren't good head coaches at either level. Sometimes guys are good head coaches at college, not pro. Sometimes, maybe it's vice versa, right? There are factors that go into why a guy might be a good head coach at one level and not another. And the games are slightly different, and the recruiting, yada, 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 right? But point being, at any given moment, there are only 30 jobs of something, right? This is not something where like, you might go to your office job and there's thousands of your office job across the country that if you want another job, you can go to another state and have another job. You can't really do that. They're very difficult jobs to get, which speaks to the idea that even if you do get fired from an NBA head coaching job, you probably are thought of pretty highly, and like the opportunity to get one of those jobs does not come around very often. So yes, it is a very big deal to even show the chops to get one of those jobs. I think this gives Bill Self his most star-studded assistant coach that he's had in his time with KU. Now, I mean from a coaching profession, right? If you're talking about just star-studded from KU lore, that would have been Danny Manning, because Danny Manning is the most accomplished player in KU basketball history. So when Danny was an assistant for Bill Self, he was the most star-studded in terms of just KU lore. If you're talking about what assistant coach during the Bill Self tenure has the best coaching resume, it's Jock Vaughn, right? Because you can point to like Norm Roberts and Curtis Townsend and their head coach, Joe Dooley and whatever, like their past head coaching stops at other schools and, mixed results for some of those guys. None of them are head coaches in the NBA, So from that perspective, I don't know how much it matters, but like it does matter a little bit, right? You would think the guys in the NBA are on the forefront of the most advanced ways of thinking and can freshen up playbooks and have a wide variety of playbooks and things that they can do both in practice and with game planning and stuff like that he brings with him to Lawrence. And obviously this was all made possible by the fact that Norm Roberts retired. So it opened up a position on the coaching staff. It seems like Chase Buford is in a position to kind of get elevated here. So you're talking about a kind of new look to the bench to KU, and that can't be a bad thing. After you've had 2 years where it's gotten a little bit more stale, like you get some new voices in there, you get some different opinions to kind of help this team evolve in a real way. And so Vaughn's ability to be around the NBA, be around the decision-making, be around the political side of things in terms of like contract negotiations, dealing with people in the locker room, that's only going to help him especially in today's way of things in the college game. So plus the fact that Vaughn, he's a former like stud point guard, having a long double-digit career in the NBA, that probably helps you in recruiting. That probably helps you in practice, in dealing through the tribes and tribulations of full season with guys like Darren Peterson or other point guards that you have, being able to kind of connect with them. And then lastly, like it might not hurt from a donor perspective either. There's going to be a lot of KU donors out there who grew up watching Jock Vaughn, were in college when Jock Vaughn was a thing, or maybe just graduated when Vaughn was in college and now they've made it big and they loved watching him. They might be a little bit more willing to donate a little extra coin. Maybe it helps you with roster building as well. And certainly I think Jock Vaughn probably has some good. We've been talking about KU having international recruiting. I would imagine Jacque Vaughn being in the NBA for as long as he did has probably made some good connections, whether it's with scouts or people overseas, because you have to be more tied in with the overseas stuff in the NBA. That might not hurt either in recruiting for KU. So home run hire. This is an A+ hire for KU as an assistant coach and a pretty big deal. Could he be the next head coach of Kansas? Do I like that idea? We'll discuss that, though, on the other side. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and you can get in on the action of KU winning the national title. If you think Jock Vaughn's going to get them over the hump, well, do that over at FanDuel. Plus, the NBA and NHL playoffs are in full swing and full hit. I don't know. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot or breakout star. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performances, trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. And again, you can get early action on the KU basketball season. You can get early action on the KU football season. Bet the over-under on the win total or KU to win the Big 12. It's a crapshoot anyway. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. So, Jacque Vaughn becomes the newest assistant coaching hire for KU basketball. Let's start here. Could Jacque Vaughn, because like I said, A+ hire as an assistant coach. Assistant coach, head coach are two different conversations here, right? Could he be the head coach in waiting? Could he be the head coach of the future for Kansas? Let's start with the could he before we get to the should he part of this, okay? So the could he be the next head coach for the University of Kansas? Well, yeah, the short answer, yes. Okay, next podcast. No, the short answer is yes, because, to begin with, even if he didn't take this job, whenever Bill Self retires, it could be in a year from now, it could be 5 years from now, it could be 7, I don't know, right? Whenever Bill Self does retire, whenever Bill Self does move on, I don't think it would have been shocking given the fact that Jacque Vaughn has been now a head coach at the NBA level. And like we've seen, BYU had some success this year with a former NBA assistant coach. We've seen, former NBA head coaches come back to college, varying degrees of success. Some guys have been guys who were at college, then NBA, then came back. Others have been, NBA straight to college, like a Mike Woodson, for instance. And not to say that Jock Vaughn would be like Mike Woodson. I think very different there for a couple of reasons. But nonetheless, just point being, like, we've seen that be a thing. And obviously Jacque Vaughn is somebody that is probably endeared by the athletic department at KU. Travis Goff probably, I think he graduated in the early 2000s. So I don't know if he would have been at school when Jacque Vaughn was at KU or if he would have been a KU fan before he went to KU, and to where, that was somebody he kind of idolized. Like, and obviously he's a very well-spoken person. He's a very intelligent person. And being at the NBA level, like, he would have been a candidate on the short list regardless here, is kind of where I'm getting at. I do think the matter of, like, how long is it before Bill Self retires does matter a little bit to this conversation, right? Because let's say Bill Self has 2 more years in him. Okay, at that point, Jacque Vaughn will be 52. So, yeah, you could get, 10, 15, 20 years out of Jacque Vaughn. Just depends how long he would want to coach, right? Versus the flip side of it is, what if Bill Self does still have another 5 years in him? What if he has another 7 years in him? At that point, Jacque Vaughn's 55, he's 57. Does that lessen the chances of him being hired in any way? I don't know. It might not. He might want to go for somebody younger at that point in time. So that does have an impact on it, but clearly he would have been a candidate. It doesn't hurt that you now get familiar with things. Now, the level of success to which Kansas has or doesn't have over the years that Jacque Vaughn's an assistant will matter, because it's really hard to judge what level of impact an assistant coach is having. I think it's a little bit easier for schools where it's like they have an offensive coordinator, they have a defensive coordinator. Like Mark Adams, for instance, under Chris Beard, he was their defensive coordinator. And like, it was easy to see, okay, look at the impact that he's having on the defensive side of the ball. Even when Chris Beard leaves to Texas, that first year without him, they got a 3 seed under Mark Adams and still had an elite defense in the country, right? With KU, they don't work it that way. They work bigs and guards and stuff like that. And sometimes that can just be dependent, are the bigs doing well, are the guards doing well, based on, okay, did the player you recruit, is that a good player, right? So it's a little hard to tell how good of a job an assistant coach is doing, other than like talking to that coach and what do you think? And I guess talking to the players, and I don't know, like even that can be an inexact science, right? Because you might think that somebody's doing a good job, but it's like, I guess you don't actually know. There's not like tangible, decisions that the assistant coach is making that you can point to with the head coach where you're like, oh, this was his record at that stop. You know what I mean? You can't do that as much with assistant coaches. So it very much just does become, is the team doing well? Is the team not doing well? And then you either get praise that you get packed along with, or you get blame that you get kind of packed along with, whether you're deserving of the good or the bad, either way. So it's hard to tell, but being around it, being able to, soak things up and where things are at with the current college landscape can't be the worst thing in the world. I don't know that Kansas would give the head coach and waiting thing. That feels like something where it would be very like, could they give that down the road? Sure. I don't know that they would do that right on hiring a guy, especially with Bill Self. And again, like I've kind of heard things that, yeah, okay, maybe he wants Chris Beard to be the next head coach. Maybe things go so well with Jock Vaughn that he changes the tune and that Jock ends up being the guy for him. And he's willing to stand on a pedestal, and him and Travis Goff. And obviously he'd have some donor support with Jacque Vaughn based on kind of being a fan favorite and stuff like that. Like that, maybe that is something that ends up happening. But yes, I think he would be a real candidate for KU. I think this would only strengthen the fact that he could be a real candidate for KU, because now you just add to the resume that you've kind of been around it a little bit more. Now, like I said earlier, the question of could versus should is a different discussion. So let's finish up with that on this A+ assistant coaching hire of Jock Vaughn. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks and making us your first listen every day. Thank you, everydayers, catching each and every episode. Don't forget, you check out Locked On College Basketball or Locked On College Football for your second listen as well. Okay, so Jock Vaughn hired as an assistant coach. And again, like I've said, A+++ assistant coaching hire, right? If I was judging this as an assistant coaching hire, which I am, I mean, it's a home run, knocked it out of the ballpark. Now, let's say this. If I was judging this as a head coaching hire, like let's say right now, let's say Bill Self would have retired and they would have hired Jock Vaughn this offseason. Or even if you do want to fast forward a couple of years, how would I grade that? Or how would I grade it being the head coach and waiting? That, for that specific role, again, as an assistant coach, this is an A+. For that specific role, I would probably grade it a C+ to a B-, somewhere in that range. That may sound harsh. I don't mean it to be, because how I would view things would be a C for me would be passing. A C, it is. A C is a passing grade. That would be keeping the line moving. That would be fine, right? A D would be, yeah, I don't want that. An F would be, no, that was a failure, right? An A would be an absolute home run. And a B would be, okay, this is solid. It's somewhere between a C and a B for me, right? If he is the future head coach. I will say that if that is the ultimate goal, if that is something that Travis Goff is eyeing for him to be the future head coach, I do like the idea that he'll be on staff beforehand at the very least. Like, I think that helps a little bit more than just coming from not being here, I guess, right? At least he gets to acclimate himself with the college game, which certainly the college game has become more like the pro game in a lot of ways, but it's still different in a lot of other ways. And honestly, is more crazy and more wild than the pro game, because there aren't contracts in college versus there are at the NBA level. So it's a good thing to get, up front and personal with it and get more familiar with it. So to be fully fair, we've seen strong college coaches suck in the NBA, then come back to college and do wonders. Rick Pitino is one of the best college basketball coaches of all time. He didn't do well in the NBA. John Calipari struggled in the NBA for him. He's been great in college. Billy Donovan never has come back to college since he's gone off to the NBA with the Thunder and the Bulls and stuff. But like, he was an unbelievable college basketball coach. He's been a fine NBA coach, right? To where like the pro game, very much more so, honestly, is about your roster than it's going to be about the head coach. Now, there are exceptions to the rule to a little bit, like what Brad Stevens did with the Celtics for a while, what Eric Spoelstra's done with the Heat. Like, they have mattered a ton, but even then, like the Heat, they're getting the 8th seed this year because they didn't have enough bang on the roster, right? So it matters a lot about your roster. It matters about the GM. It matters about the luck in the draft, whether it's the lottery or who you end up with, in a later pick that ended up being better than you might have thought. And the fact that BYU had success this year, as I mentioned earlier, with a coach who was an assistant coach at the NBA level before he got the head coaching job, those are all good examples to point to if Jacque Vaughn were eventually the head coach for KU. There's also examples I can point to that are bad, though. Juwan Howard, he was an assistant coach forever in the NBA level. And he goes back to his alma mater at Michigan, and, they weren't a disaster, but he ends up getting fired. Things didn't work out there, right? Mike Woodson, who I mentioned earlier, that didn't work out as a former NBA head coach. And those are at big places, Michigan and Indiana. I think if you're viewing it from just a head coach and waiting perspective, forget the NBA thing, like that can be a mixed bag too, right? I mean, we've seen it work out so far at Duke, I think. How much of that is about the roster? How much of it is about John Shire? I don't know. We may never know because Duke's just going to keep reeling in 5-star recruits, right? The UNC thing with the head coach in waiting with Hubert Davis, that's been a mixed bag. Like they made a title game. They got a 1 seed a separate year. Those are great. But in the years in between, it hasn't been so good, especially at a school like Carolina where you're expecting consistency year in and year out, right? We can point to Texas where the interim head coach turned, head coach and Rodney Terry. That didn't work out. You can cherry pick arguments for both sides. You can find coaches that relate to both sides that would say this would work or this wouldn't work, right? And I don't know what to do with this either. I guess I saw somebody bring this up, so I went and looked at it myself. I guess none of the Jacque Vaughn NBA teams that he was a head coach of, so with the Magic and with the Nets, and do keep in mind, one of the years with the Nets, he was interim, and one of them he got fired later in the year, so you're not getting exact congruency here with all the years, but none of the years that he was a head coach in the NBA, the team went over on the over-under win total. So they never, I guess another way of putting that would be they never exceeded expectations. Again, though, in the NBA, it's largely based on roster. It's largely based on what superstars you have on your team. It's based on the front office moves. Are you tanking? Are you not? Are they going to trade away your good players at the trade deadline? So that does matter. But also some of that stuff might matter more to winning percentage. I can hear a little bit the idea that okay, the over-under win total at the end of the day is based on what the expectations are of the team, based on all of those things. The roster that you put together, the over-under win total is going to be the expectation, what that roster can put together. And the fact that you never went over on the over-under win total probably tells you that, okay, there was never an exceeding of the expectations based on the roster. At the same point in time, could that be crap luck? Could it be some injury stuff too, right? Absolutely. So again, that's something where you can point to it. You can also poke holes in it. So I don't know. I guess though, for me, I've never been somebody who's totally subscribed to the idea that you have to get somebody with Kansas ties. Don't limit yourself to the idea that the next Kansas head coach has to be somebody who is an alma mater from Kansas or has Kansas ties. Just get the best candidate. Just get the guy who's going to win most games. You know what I mean? To a certain level. I don't want Chris Beard. But anyway, neither here nor there. So for me, that's Nate Oates. That's, I don't know, Tommy Lloyd or whatever, right? Or my second tier of guys, right? And I'm not naming all the coaches. If you're an everydayer and already caught our coaching episode, you can go back and watch that, whatever. Like a Dusty May or Graham McCaslin, whatever. So there would be certain guys for me above that list. And I would have Jock Vaughn in that regard, in the tier 3, where it's if you ended up in a situation like Kentucky did when they hired Mark Pope, where it's they went for Scott Drew and he said no, and they went for this guy and he said no, and they went for that guy and he said no. And maybe you end up on your guys a little bit down the list, and you end up with Mark Pope to where, especially for guys down the list, and that worked out okay, right? That's how I would have this with Jacque Vaughn for me, where it's to me, the A hires would be the Oates of the world, the Lloyds of the world, the Goldens of the world. The B hires might be the B plus hires. I don't know, might be like a Dusty May. The B hires might be a McCaslin. And so that's where I would just have this Jacque Vaughn one. I think it would be fine if he was the future head coach. I'd have it a C plus or a B minus. It wouldn't be my favorite in the world. It wouldn't be the most inspiring hire in the world, but I could see a world where it would work, and I think it would be fine. But again, I don't want to take away from I feel I don't want to poop on the parade, right? Because from an assistant coaching hire, this is an A+++ move. This is an awesome move to have Jacque Vaughn as an assistant coach at the University of Kansas, and he's cool. He's back, and he's going to add something to the team as an assistant coach, and absolutely love the hire as an assistant coach. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. See you next time for another edition of LOJ.